free.
Dense fog and thunderstorms forced a temporary ground stop at Dallas airports. 20% of all flights canceled, and with ripple effects impacting other airports.
54 million passengers are expected to travel by air this holiday season, according to the airlines, with today and tomorrow, as well as Sunday, expected to be the busiest. But so far, with the exception of that Dallas problem spot, so far across the country, air travel has been going relatively smoothly.
ABC's Mola Lengi. The rebel government in Syria says 14 security personnel were killed in what they're calling an ambush by supporters of ousted dictator al-Assad.
These were former members of Assad's forces. We understand that it's the first direct challenge to Syria's de facto government since the Assad regime was toppled. It came hours after the new administration said its forces killed a besieged group of remnants of the former regime.
ABC's Britt Clennett in Tel Aviv. Separately, Israeli airstrikes inside Yemen killed 4 and wounded at least 18, according to Yemen's health ministry. Israel going after targets it says were smuggling in Iranian weapons and munitions.
The Houthis, which are backed by Iran, have continued these attacks on Israel since the start of the Gaza war, and this is now the 4th confirmed attack by Israel on Houthi targets in Yemen since the war began, in retaliation for those attacks.
Again, correspondent Clennett. Richard Cantu, ABC News.
This is Rocky Moselle with International Star Registry. Over the past 45 years, we have named millions of stars for celebrities, dignitaries, and individuals worldwide. For $59 and a call to 800-282-3333 or visit starregistry.com, you can name a star and give the ultimate Christmas gift. The star name will be recorded in book form in the U.S. Copyright Office. Visit starregistry.com or call 800-282-3333 to give the brightest gift. That's 800-282-3333.
News Talk 610 AM and 102.1 FM. KVNU.
I'm Bill Walter, KVNU News. News is brought to you by Roof Rescue. It was more of a wet Christmas than a white Christmas for Utahns along the Wasatch Front. The string of storms in the forecast is expected to help the state's snowpack, but some water watchers said there is a different problem on the horizon. The soil moisture levels are so low that much of the water in the high elevations will be soaked back into the dirt in the spring and not in reservoirs. The National Weather Service is expecting certain mountain ranges along northern Utah to get the most snow in the series of storms coming for the rest of the week. According to meteorologist Lisa Verzella, places like Upper Cottonwood Canyon, Ben Lomond, and the Bear River Range could get the most snow because of how they face the upcoming storm fronts. However, this is not going to be a drought buster. The problem, according to Utah Snow Survey Supervisor Jordan Clayton, is that the ground is a lot drier than normal in the higher elevations. Officials have been checking soil saturation for the past 20 years and said this season is particularly low. Also, it's too late in the season to fix the problem. Clayton said any water that lands on the high mountains now would just freeze until the spring runoff. He believes Utah will need a busy winter to get back to what is considered normal. However, Clayton also said it is not time to panic about this just yet. There have been good water years that started slow. At the same time, there have been bad water years that started great. A 44-year-old Logan man has been sentenced to prison after repeatedly driving under the influence of alcohol. John Jeffrey All Simmons has been in the Cache County Jail since crashing into a utility pole in October. Simmons was sentenced December 23rd in Logan's First District Court. He previously had accepted a plea deal in 2 separate cases, pleading guilty to 2 counts of driving under the influence, a third-degree felony. Cache County Deputy Attorney Joshua Duty explained how Simmons crashed into a power pole on October 6th. Police later determined his blood alcohol level was 10 times over the legal limit. Duty asked the court to impose a prison sentence. He said Simmons had a lethal level of alcohol in his system after the latest arrest and is not learning his lesson. Simmons said he took full responsibility for his actions. He explained how his life had been heading downward. Judge Spencer Walsh noted how Simmons had admitted to drinking between 12 and 15 beers a day before being arrested. He told the defendant, "You are playing with fire." Simmons was ordered to serve between 0 to 5 years in the Utah State Correctional Facility and complete substance abuse treatment. He was given credit for time already served in jail. It will be up to the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole to determine when Simmons will be released. And a man was found dead on Mount Olympus on Wednesday. Salt Lake County Sheriff Sergeant Christian Olson said hikers called rescue crews, that is, at about 3:30 p.m. He said when crews arrived, the man was found dead. First responders believe the man died recently, and they are not treating it as a suspicious death. No other details were released. KVNU Weather is brought to you by Logan Extermination. Give them a call at 752-8450. Winter storm warning in effect for the mountains, and that's in effect until 11 o'clock Saturday night. And for the Cache Valley, a rain-snow mix tonight, and some thunder also possible tonight. Overnight low in the mid-20s, around 26, and new snow accumulation of less than half an inch possible. Mostly a rain event on Friday, possibly mixed with snow, becoming all rain late Friday afternoon, and high temperature around 40. Rain or rain and snow mixed Friday night into Saturday. Get more news at CacheValleyDaily.com.
For over a decade, Roof Rescue has been safeguarding your homes with the finest roofing solutions. We understand the value of your time. That's why we're committed to replacing most roofs in just one day. With award-winning service, 100% guaranteed workmanship, and the best warranties in the industry, your watertight peace of mind is guaranteed. Call us today at 435-999-4268 or visit roofrescueusa.com and ask for the $250 off any roof replacement. Financing available? That's roofrescueusa.com.
610 AM and 102.1 FM. News Talk KVNU.
Anderson Seed & Garden's Christmas blowout event continues. Now save 50 to 75% off almost all Christmas items in stock. That includes trees, ribbons, garland and wreaths, ornaments, and much more. They also have clearance markdown items starting at $1. All sales are final. It may be winter, but it's never a bad time to learn about gardening. Sign up for their weekly gardening class, which starts January 27th. $40 a person or $60 for two. See store for details. There's always something new at Anderson Seed & Garden, Logan.
25 NCAA championships, 18 conference championships.
And the Aggies are going dancing.
10 tournament championships.
The Aggies are pulling out the scissors, and they're going to cut down the nest.
Our winning culture continues. Our Utah State Aggies play here on the Aggie Sports Network.
Pre-game begins 1 hour before tip-off. Don't miss game day on your home of the Aggies. News Talk KVNU.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Hour 2 of today's show. And time to get into it. This is one of my favorite times of year. The few days here on the show in between the Christmas holiday and the New Year's holiday, when I get a chance. I love lists. I don't know why, but I get a chance to just go through every random list that I can find out there and see be reminded what happened this year. Now, one thing I can say is in the last few years, politics has been less entertaining. There was a time, believe it or not, when going through a what happened in politics over the last year list would crack you up, would make you laugh, would even sometimes warm your heart. Not really the way it works anymore in America, and we'll get back to that, actually. This ties in with an entry in one of my lists that I have here for you this hour. But I wanted to start off with a bit of trivia because a listener asked, and I thought that is actually something that I didn't know until I looked it up. So you just heard Auld Lang Syne. This is originally a Scottish song, and the direct translation of this is Old Long Since. And the song itself, if you actually listen, so you heard the Dropkick Murphys there as we opened the show, singing the actual original traditional Scottish version, which was first made popular in the 19th century, actually. And in the United States, it became popular when Guy Lombardo, in 1929, Guy Lombardo and his big band, which were, basically the I don't even know who the popular pop stars are these days. It's basically the Charlie X of Brat Summer. This Guy Lombardo and his band were the Brat Summer of 1929, and they played on their New Year's Eve broadcast in 1929. They played the original Scottish full lyrics, Auld Lang Syne. And again, translated to mean, direct translation is Old Long Since. But this is actually a phrase in Scotland that is tied to looking back to remembering fondly, things that felt good. Memories, friends, experiences throughout life. And the song's lyrics, if you go through them, start to finish, talks about friends reconnecting over drinks or food, reminiscing about their friendship. You get the also from the lyrics, you get the impression this is maybe an older person. This isn't a teenager. And so someone maybe in the latter half of their life, and just kind of reflecting on the good memories, good friends, good experiences. And then my favorite part of the song, actually, it wraps up with, so there's a question in the song, which is, what do you do with all these memories? What do you do with all this, when you get to old and long and since, meaning, maybe a lot of things maybe people have passed on in your life. Maybe maybe some of your favorite memories are 30 years ago. Maybe there are people in your life who have been in your life for 30 years or 40 years or 50 years or 60 years. What do you do with all that? And the song's message basically is encapsulated in the final verse of the song, where the answer to what do you do with all that is share a cup of kindness yet. That's a line from the song that, now when you hear this song used as part of New Year's Eve celebrations, you never get that far into it because it's actually a 4-minute long song in its original version. But everybody's familiar with the if you will, the melody and opening melody of the song. And it can be done in loud saxophone. It can be done, I heard a rap version the other day. This is sort of a slower, like folk guitar version, I think. Yeah. This, by the way, is an original Scottish recording from 1942. Anyway, so how did this become the official New Year's Eve song for Americans? It was Guy Lombardo. Again, in 1929, as part of a New Year's Eve radio broadcast, the Guy Lombardo, who again was the Charlie X, the Brat Summer pop musician of 1929, he and his band played in their 1929 final day of the year broadcast on radio. They played this song, an instrumental version of the Scottish New Year song, which again is about reflecting not only over the past year, but back on your life, and then using all these memories to, quote, share a cup of kindness yet, to use your memories and your experiences as a reason to be a kind person going into the new year. So that's where the song was first introduced in any popular format. And his version, by the way, that very Guy Lombardo version is still played at midnight in the New Year's Eve Times Square celebration, not in the televised broadcast. But if you're ever in Times Square on New Year's Eve, you'll actually hear that original Guy Lombardo 1929 recording of the first time Americans had really been widely exposed to this Scottish traditional song. So the song's now popular all over the world and has been recorded millions of times in different languages, different instruments. It's been used in film, TV, and again, for most of us, it's associated with the new year. One of the history of the Lombardo version itself, why it became identified basically as the New Year's Eve song. Lombardo himself was asked about this, why he thought it caught on and became an American phenomenon and then a global phenomenon. And he said, first he said, I don't really know. I have no specific answer on this. The song itself is actually, a great message about kindness, about appreciating what you've had in life, even those who have maybe left your life or even passed away. And he said, then taking all of the good experiences, not the sad ones, and turning that into a reason to go forward, being kind. And he said that he thinks, Lombardo said he thought it was just timing, maybe. His band was famous for these New York City concerts, and so a lot of people were tuning in, both in person but also in radio broadcasts. And he said, I've never been able to explain this, why this one performance of this obscure, at the time, traditional Scottish song became, forever associated in our cultural history and all of our minds, even still today, almost 100 years later from that 1929 broadcast, associated with New Year's Eve. But there you have it. There's the history of Auld Lang Syne. And if you want to hear the original Scottish version, I've posted on our Facebook page probably the closest you'll get to a true Scottish folk version by a folk performer, a Scottish folk performer named Robert Burns Kasonga. And I've linked to that on our Facebook page, or you're welcome to just Google it. It's like I say, the closest I've ever found to what that, as far as I've read at least, what the original traditional song would have been, how it would have been performed before this became the worldwide famous official New Year's Eve song, this traditional Scottish ballad. So check it out. I've linked to it on our Facebook page, and we'll get back to lists on the other side, kicking things off with the best, and this is my list. I actually kept track this year. The best and worst nonfiction books I listened to this year, right after this.
For more than a century, S.E. Needham Jewelers has been repairing jewelry and watches in Cache Valley. We do all our work on premises, and you may even talk directly with our expert technicians. We also have today's state-of-the-art equipment, including a laser welder that will repair jewelry with precision. We guarantee our work and offer competitive prices. So whether repairing your precious wedding ring, sizing a ring, or simply changing a watch battery, come to Utah's oldest jewelry store at today's newest technology and repair. S.E. Needham Jewelers, middle of the block at the sign of the clock.
It's Cody from Industrial Tool and Supply. Usually, I'm here talking about our Makita deals, but in the holiday rush, I often forget to express my gratitude to you. Thanks for backing me, my team, and our local business for 35 years. As a second-generation owner, your support means the world to me. Thanks for letting us assist you, your family, and your business with Makita products and more. We appreciate your trust in us to get the job done. From the bottom of our hearts, Industrial Tool and Supply and Makita extend a heartfelt thank you.
Nestled in the heart of breathtaking landscape, Maple Creek Ranch on the north end of Cache Valley is more than just land. It's where your story begins. It's the perfect location for building your dream home. But only a few lots remain, so act now to claim your piece of paradise. Imagine mornings with breathtaking views, evenings by the fire, and every moment surrounded by the peaceful charm of nature. With stunning views, babbling brooks, and miles of wilderness. Google Maple Creek Ranch to learn more about these final few lots
Hi, this is Gordon Deal. Friday on This Morning, America's First News. In a pivot of sorts from his first term, President-elect Trump seems to be relying on members of his extended family rather than immediate family. Also, this year may stand out as the one that stopped wrecking our finances. We'll examine the different reasons why. And preparing your investment portfolio for a bumpy 2025. Friday on This Morning, America's First News. From 4 to 6 on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102 FM. Your station for news and talk.
As you get older, it's more important than ever to eat healthy. But that can be hard for those of us who are retired and living on a fixed income, especially during COVID-19. A friend told me about benefitscheckup.org. It's a free website from the National Council on Aging, and it's helped millions of older Americans pay for healthy food. Maybe it can help you. Benefitscheckup.org. You've earned this. This message is supported by the Administration for Community Living.
Welcome back to KVN News for the People. Getting to the lists. Going to be doing this over the next several days. We'll also have our regular programming, some guests, some news items, and more. But today, just kind of taking it easy after a couple days off for the holiday and a couple days off next week to look forward to. So we'll take it. We'll continue to take it easy. But interesting. This is so every year I said I was going to do this. In 2024, I finally did, and that was actually keep notes. I haven't had a real reason outside of notes here and there for work to keep detailed notes since I was a college student, but I made myself do it this year. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I do this if I have any drive that's over half an hour. I call that an audiobook drive. Otherwise, it's usually music or radio. But over half an hour, I'm going to an audiobook, and I can't listen to fiction. I don't know what this is. I've been told this might be attached to some sort of either learning disability or even attention deficit issue, and I don't know. I've never been diagnosed, but I can't listen to fiction. I love fiction. I can read fiction, either a physical book or an ebook. I can read fiction. I read a lot of fiction and have my whole life, but I can't listen to it for some reason. My brain wanders. Unless I'm learning something, unless new information about a real world thing is being dumped into my head, like I'm sitting in a classroom, my brain just checks out when I hear a human voice talking, and for too long. And it starts thinking about other things. My checking account, the list of things I have to do, how close am I to needing an oil change. And then I realize I've missed 2 chapters, and I don't really remember where my brain checked out, so I have to rewind. So I don't listen to fiction. I listen to nonfiction, and at the gym, while driving, walking the dog sometimes. It ends up, it puts me in a situation by the time I get to the end of the year, some years, I've got 30, 40 books that I've listened to. That's an intense year. Usually it's probably closer to 20. So I kept notes this year of some of my favorites. And then I decided I was actually going to start jotting down the ones that I wanted to warn people to avoid. And I only did this if it was otherwise getting popular. If it was some obscure or old nonfiction book or history book and I just didn't like it, I left it out. But there were a couple that were on the bestsellers lists for a long time that I thought were actually awful. And so I've included those in my list. So, but I want to start off here. Before I actually get into the list, I want to single one out because I didn't rank this from like best to number 9. I just wrote down the ones that I really like that people might enjoy, especially if you listen to this show. These are topics. The book's topics will veer in and out of real-world events and even politics. And if it's history, it's attached to our something in current events. That tends to be where my brain goes when I select a book. But there were a couple that were recommended to me by friends, and this is one of them. And so I want to start, before I get to the full list, which I'll do on the other side of the news, I want to start out here before the news break with Bill, talking about this one, because it's so, when I listened to this, my mind wasn't really thinking about our modern times or the presidential election or politics in general or media and social media. A friend said, this book I just finished. This is kind of what it's about. It's kind of right in your wheelhouse. It connects history with technology, with news and media consumption, three of my favorite topics, and things to read about. And so she said, I just think you'd really like this. So I grabbed it and I listened to it, and I listened to it twice, which is really rare. It's horrifying, but it is so eye-opening. And I think it would actually help a lot of people navigate our current information world, specifically when it comes to using social media, which is a good place to. So I joined Twitter in 2009, that long ago. It was like 6 months old. And I did that because all the journalists here in Utah were using it to post and share their stories. And I thought, what a great way to find news, not just for radio show topics, but just for me, for things that, the interesting things to read about the local news around me. And I loved it. And then I started following more people, and then Twitter becomes this thing, and now Elon owns it, and it's awful, and it's not nearly as useful as it used to be as a news and information source. And that's led to this entire industry of disinformation exposés and exposers who have popped up to try and combat what Twitter has become, which is a great place. Let me put it this way. As things have gone on in Israel and in Ukraine, there was a time when Twitter would be your go-to spot for live, on the ground, at that moment, information about what just happened. It is no longer that. Twitter is now a good place to see something and think to yourself, well, I'm not resharing that because I don't know if this person is just making that up, and I can't find sourcing for the photo they've shared, and they don't include a link, so I'm just going to move on. So it's no longer useful as an information source, which is sad to me. Bluesky has kind of replaced it. Blue Sky has kind of replaced it in that way, but I'm also a cynic, and I think eventually Blue Sky will be corrupted like Twitter has been. And so right now you can go to set up an account at Blue Sky and get that original Twitter experience if you're careful about who you follow, at least. And that's great. But I don't think it'll last. And that's what made this book so compelling, because I've been asking myself as I thought all this, like, why do we go in this direction? Obviously a big part of it is there's money to be made for people with lack of morals and ethics. And that's the biggest contributor. There are people out there who know they're spreading propaganda and misinformation, know that they're harming the world, know that they're harming people, know that they're misinforming people about what's happening in the world around them, but they can make money doing it, or they're paid sometimes by, less than noble players to do so. And, that's always been the case, right? There's always someone out there that was willing to cash a check and had no moral objection to what it is that he or she was being asked to do in order to get that money. That's not new. But social media allows them to have a much larger megaphone and audience, and that's scary. So that's what this book is about. But what I loved about this book, it's called Invisible. The subtitle is The People Who Turn Lies into Reality. It's written by a person who specializes in disinformation research and political propaganda through history at Stanford University. Renee DiResta is her name. It's called Invisible, The People Who Turn Lies into Reality. And my favorite part about this book is that one of the first things she does in the book is connect. It's called Invisible Rulers. I totally messed that up. It's called Invisible Rulers, The People Who Turn Lies into Reality. And my favorite part about this book, one, it's fascinating. How she does her research is fascinating. How disinformation, intentional misinformation spread with a purpose is what we're talking about here. Not people who just got something wrong and didn't bother to Google it to see if they were correct and shared it out to their 3,000 followers. We're not talking about that here, although that's a problem in just kind of an annoying way, right? We're talking about an entire ecosystem in which people with purpose are trying to twist reality on social media, either for political propaganda purposes or because someone's paying them to do it. Russia has been caught doing this quite often over the last few years, not just in the U.S. either, all around the world, trying to paint a picture that isn't real using social media and misinformation, and how easy it is to fool people on Twitter, especially right now, to their advantage. That's what DeResta is writing about here. But why invisible rulers? And that's what I think is so fascinating about this book, is she starts out in the very first chapter by basically pointing at you, the reader, and saying, unless you take the personal responsibility to inoculate yourself and your information intake streams, whether that be no matter what kind of news media you're consuming, if you're not being careful and not taking the personal responsibility to make sure that you're consuming credible news sources, which is actually a pretty easy thing to do, then you're being ruled by people and you don't even know who they are. If you're allowing your perception of reality, whether it's politics, whether it's a political candidate, whether it is media, whether it is some pop star, but if you are allowing, basically willingly allowing yourself to be misinformed and have your worldview, your understanding of what's happening around you, more informed by political propaganda or intentional disinformation, then you are giving up your freedom. You are basically saying to some total stranger or group of strangers, yes, control me. Because that's exactly what they're doing, DeResta says. Now, this is in the foreword to the book that she gets to this point, which I have wanted somebody to say forever, that there's an element of personal responsibility to our fight against disinformation. That people need to start holding themselves as individuals to a higher standard on what they choose to consume, or even more so what they choose to consume and then share with others. It is not hard to make sure you're reading or hearing a credible source. It is not hard to make a distinction between political opinion or columnists, whether they be talkers on the radio like me or Sean Hannity, or whether they be a columnist writing in the New York Times, and what a journalist does. Which is just report the facts of a situation and throw it out there to inform people. These lines have all gotten blurred, and people don't make these distinctions anymore. And DeResta writes about that in this book. She writes about how this had already been happening, and that's what opened the door for it to be exploited by people like Russian oligarchs or terrorist organizations. But I love that she starts the book and titles the book Invisible Rulers, because her opening point is that if you are allowing yourself to have a head full of disinformation, things that aren't true, that are said to you for political purposes or monetization purposes, or by someone who just lacks the morals and ethics to be honest, or another country, a foreign adversary of the U.S. I mean, there's so many ways disinformation can come your way on Twitter, for example, the list goes on and on. But if you're allowing yourself to have your worldview, quote unquote, informed by this disinformation that's generated with purpose, not by accident, you are allowing yourself to be ruled by the propagandists and the disinformers. And that was such an amazing opening that this book stood out to me more than any other book I read. Now, the book itself is an exploration of how this research is done, how disinformation is spotted, and also a great recap of some of the disinformation plots that have been foiled or discovered after the fact. It is a fascinating read. It's a fast read. I think it was about 9 hours long as an audiobook. Again, researcher at Stanford University. She specializes in disinformation and political propaganda throughout history. Renee DiResta's Invisible Rulers. So if you're going to pick up one book based on my best of list here, make it that one. And that's why I wanted to start with that one. We'll get to the rest of the list, though. The best audiobooks, nonfiction audiobooks I listened to this year while either at the gym, walking the dog, or driving. And also a couple that I'd recommend you don't waste your time with. We'll get to the rest of the list after this look at the news with KVNU's Bill Walter.
Thank you, Jason. KVNU News is brought to you by Dr. Keith Nelson. A man who police say had several warrants for his arrest allegedly tried to pull out a stolen handgun while officers were arresting him Monday afternoon. 41-year-old William Bryant Avery was booked into the Salt Lake County Jail on suspicion of aggravated assault, theft of a firearm, being a restricted person with a firearm, possession of a controlled substance, and drug paraphernalia, also interference with a police officer. Cottonwood Heights police received information that Avery was at a Target grocery store. According to police, Avery had multiple outstanding warrants for his arrest, and officers began to locate him. Officers waited outside the grocery store, and as Avery exited the store, police approached him and told him he was under arrest. According to the affidavit, as Avery was being placed in handcuffs, he attempted to run away from a uniformed officer. The officers were able to wrestle Avery to the ground, but police say he continued to resist arrest and disregarded all commands to stop resisting. Avery made numerous attempts to reach for something in his front pocket. Eventually, officers were able to subdue Avery, and he was taken into police custody. While police searched Avery, they found a stolen handgun in his front pocket, and police believe he was attempting to take it out of his pocket during the struggle. Freshman wide receiver George Demopoulos threw a 25-yard touchdown pass to Dane Partridge on the first play of double overtime, and Jordan Hansen ended the game on a fourth down sack to give Northern Illinois a 28-20 victory over Fresno State in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl in Boise. KVNU weather, winter storm warning is in effect for the mountains all the way to Saturday night at 11 o'clock. Rain and snow in the valley location. Some thunder is also possible tonight. Overnight low in the mid-20s, and then rain possibly mixed with snow, becoming all rain after 5 p.m. on Friday, and the high temperature expected to be in the low 40s. New snow accumulation less than half an inch possible tonight and Friday. And weather brought to you by Triton Medical Supply and Transportation, a partner for your medical needs. Top quality medical soft goods like incontinence supplies and oxygen needs is some of what they provide. Go to mytritonsupply.com or call 435-557-6687. Get more news at cachevalleydaily.com.
ABC News, I'm Richard Cantu. The western U.S. getting a good dose of winter weather.
We have an atmospheric river, a parade of storms that will continue to bring dangerous weather over the next 4 days across the West Coast. High surf advisories stretch all the way up and down the West Coast. You could see waves 35 feet upwards in parts of coastal Oregon, up to 15 feet in Southern California, and all about the snow. Winter storm warnings across all the mountains from the Northern Rockies to the Cascades down to the Sierra. Very active pattern through Sunday.
ABC News meteorologist Melissa Griffin. A lot of people have been complaining about high prices, but it did not stop consumers from driving holiday sales almost 4% higher this year than last. Many analysts were expecting an increase of 3.2%. Organizers of Australia's Sydney to Hobart yacht race announced 2 sailors on separate boats were killed at sea, each hit by the boom at the bottom of the sail in wild weather. This is ABC News.
Hi, I'm Dr. Keith Nelson, board-certified, fellowship-trained orthopedic surgeon, and I want to restore your active, pain-free life. I've been an innovator in the treatment of knee pain caused by arthritis and sports injuries for 27 years. I'm the only surgeon in northern Utah to offer Omnibotics, a robotic-assisted knee replacement for your arthritic knee, which has a 97% patient satisfaction rate. Don't live with your knee pain another day. Visit drkeithnelsonortho.com. That's drkeithnelsonortho.com.
Dr. Nelson accepts most insurances, including select health plans.
We all know how it can be to go to the wrong place for car repair.
And lights on again. Can you believe this? Unbelievable.
Free local towing for major repairs over $500 at your local AA MCO.
You can find your local AMCO at 75 East, 2000 North in North Logan, 752-1940.
AA MCO.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance, reminding you that when you adopt a shelter pet, you discover all the things that make them unique. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
Welcome back to KVN News for the People. Wrapping up 2024 over the next few days here with lists. I love lists. We'll have regular programming, too. In fact, tomorrow, the For the People movie show with Andy Morgan, and we'll be recapping 2024 and also continue. We started last week, didn't get it all the way through it. Andy's ballot for the Utah Film Critics Association. What made his best of list as he sent that ballot in last Friday. So we'll get to part 2 of that discussion tomorrow on the show as well. Right now, running through my personal list, I actually bothered to do this year. I've said I've said I was going to do it for years. I finally did. I actually wrote down throughout the year notes of books, audiobooks, nonfiction audiobooks I listened to while driving or at the gym or while walking the dog or whatever. That I really, really enjoyed. And I even included a couple that I want to tell people they should avoid. So again, I started out with the one I want to recommend the most, not necessarily my top book of the year, but if you're going to pick one from this list, the one that will influence you the most, Invisible Rulers by political propaganda researcher at Stanford University, Renee DiResta. And it's an amazing book. If you want to learn more about how disinformation and political propaganda from Russia or back in the Cold War or any of these things was combated and also researched and understood as to why did it work? Why did it get the public on board with this or that? It's fascinating in that way, but it's also fascinating because Renee is writing from the standpoint of if you are allowing yourself to be misinformed by an opinion maker on TV or the radio, or not misinformed, but if you're allowing your reality to be defined by someone's opinion without recognizing that is not news, it's an opinion, or if you're on Twitter having your head filled with all of the fake garbage that's dominating Twitter these days, from coming from Russia, coming from terrorist organizations were caught recently, launching a whole campaign against students in the U.S. protesting what was happening in Palestine to try and stir up discontent and get riots happening, basically. It was a terrorist organization doing that. And they were using Twitter. And so you have to they were posting fake pictures of things that supposedly were happening on campuses but weren't. And then they were getting shared widely by Americans who apparently, anyway, it's a fascinating read. But again, my favorite thing about it is that it starts out on this premise that if you're allowing your head to be filled with political propaganda, disinformation off of social media without taking the personal responsibility to make sure what you're quote unquote learning is true, you're allowing yourself to be ruled by a complete unknown entity or individual. You don't even know who your ruler is at that point. You aren't free because you're not actually in control of your world at that point. They are. But you don't even know who they are. And you might not ever. It's such a fascinating way to start the conversation. So check that out. Invisible Rulers, The People Who Turn Lies into Reality, by political propaganda researcher at Stanford University, Renee DiResta. The rest of my list. I'll just mention some titles here because they're self-explanatory, but these are, again, books that I kind of enjoyed listening to and I learned a lot from. Life After Power, 7 Presidents and Their Search for Purpose Beyond the White House, by Jared Cohen. And now he goes John Quincy Adams, Taft, but also modern presidents, George Bush, Clinton, and Obama. Fascinating read. I really enjoyed, didn't think I would because it's not my thing, but I really enjoyed a book called The Mango Tree, a memoir of fruit, Florida, and felony, by a journalist named Annabelle Tomichich. And this is a family memoir, basically, that starts out with a courtroom scene that seems, I mean, you read it and think, no way this happened. But it did. And after a night in jail, Annabelle, the author's mom, is charged with firing at a man who she says was stealing mangoes from the tree in her front yard. That's how the book starts. And there's this trial over this, but why? And then the story starts to, anyway. It's a family memoir. It's political at points. There's an economic lesson buried in the middle of it as well. I don't know. It was just a really, really true crime / social commentary memoir. So I enjoyed that one. Relinquished: The Politics of Adoption and the Privilege of Motherhood. This is kind of a controversial book, and I saw why as I was listening to it, but give it a shot. It'll make you think. This is Gretchen Sisson. She's originally a French journalist. She now lives here in the U.S. And she basically she's a researcher on this topic, but she's also in this book retelling the first birth mother's experience from a point where they're dehumanized and erased in the institution of adoption, even though they're encouraged to choose adoption over abortion, for example, by some conservative organizations, or even though states say they want to do everything to facilitate and make adoption easy for young parents who choose to go that route, or for those who want to adopt because they can't have children of their own. All this rhetoric and all this well-intended effort by states. And then in the middle of this is what is normally a traumatic and unpleasant experience for the birth mother who's giving the child up. It's really fascinating, and it also left me thinking, we could fix this so easy. Why has no one done this? Yeah. If you want to read something along the lines, I don't read a lot of these because I'm skeptical, and oftentimes the people that are writing them have an agenda that I'm not on board with. But if you want to read one about work life and making the most out of your own life while having a day job, read Slow Productivity, The Lost Art of Accomplishment Without Burnout by Cal Newport. And also just to learn his story. It's very interesting. But this is kind of like I say, I'm skeptical. This is kind of a self-help book. He's describing a philosophy that has worked well for him, where you do fewer but more important things. Instead of a gazillion small, unimportant things throughout the day, whether it be at work or in your home life, do a handful of very important things, and then allow yourself to pause and praise yourself through, whatever you enjoy that isn't work, as a reward for doing those handful of very important things. And then also he has a great message in there about no longer don't be obsessed over quality or quantity. Whether it's in your personal life, focus on quality, and the way he expresses that is great. So, really quick, because I have another list I want to get to, which is the 8 worst technology failures of 2024. I want to mention just one book that made my avoid list, and this is kind of unfair because I like the author. Oh, one other I want to mention really quick, The Achilles Trap by Steve Cole. This is the story of a decades-long relationship between the U.S. and Saddam Hussein, and if you're old enough to remember the Gulf War and then our invasion of Iraq in the 2002, 3-ish, how that all played out, wrapping up kind of with big political drama here in the U.S. in 2006 and 2007, and Republicans losing power. It's basically the story of those years, But it's all under the pretext of this decades-long relationship and even collaboration between Saddam Hussein, the CIA, and then eventually culminating in our own invasion of the country. I knew all this. If you lived the time, you've heard all this before. There's nothing really new in this. But having it put together in one book just is so mind-blowing to see and just makes international politics seem so weird. And how many times as a country we've worked against our own effort or our own best interests with a short-sighted vision. Anyway, fascinating read. But, okay, last one I want to mention here. This is from my audiobook list of the year, but this is actually one to avoid. And don't avoid the author. Author is Jonathan Haidt. He's usually pretty good. But he has a book out that was very popular this year called The Anxious Generation, which is basically a condemnation of Gen Z and the lazy youngins. The subtitle of the book was How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. Now, don't get me wrong. There is an epidemic of mental illness, but 40-year-olds are experiencing it at about the same rate as Gen Z, and Haidt doesn't say otherwise. What bothered me about this book is it was so lazy. It's titled as a must-read for all parents, a generation-defining investigation into the collapse of youth mental health. And then you read the book, and these lazy connections he makes, where he basically blames it on smartphones, social media, and, quote, big tech, which he never defines. Now, he has some great recommendations where he talks about the importance of social connections and being outside and physical activity and nature and things you can't get from staring at a phone screen. So he has some great advice in this that's backed up by a lot of child behavioral science and developmental science. So he's not completely wrong. But he starts the book with these lazy connections where he never justifies his conclusions that this is all smartphones, social media, and quote-unquote big tech, which, again, he never fully defines. I was so irritated by the time I finished reading this book, I almost wrote the author a letter. I almost did that. Dear sir, I would like to speak to your manager. I was so annoyed. And this is a famous author. He writes for The Atlantic. He's often quoted as this, this guru of understanding the social history from a generational perspective. And then along comes this book where he's just like, it's these things. Old man shouts at clouds. It reminded me, go back and read about this, but it reminded me of this craze that happened. And I worry that our governor and legislature need to be careful in some of the directions they're going this way. But go back and read about the Pac-Man hysteria in the early 80s. Pac-Man arcade games, it took the arcade from kind of an obscure thing to a generational zeitgeist. Everyone was in an arcade. Every mall had an arcade, and the arcades kept getting bigger and more crowded. And then, of course, there was this hysteria. The arcades were making kids dumb. The arcades were creating violent gangs. The kids weren't getting married and having kids anymore because of the arcades. And Haidt basically repeats all of that. And this was all centered around Pac-Man, by the way. I mean, go ahead and try and convince anyone now that Pac-Man was culturally dangerous. But Haidt does the same thing in this. Just these lazy connections, blaming a rise in youth mental health issues in the country, which is a very real problem. And just lazily saying, it's the smartphones and the social media. Too much big tech. They need to go ride horses. This is not only lazy, but it's horrible advice for 85% of the families out there that might pick up his book to better understand this issue. Maybe it's something they'd struggled with in their own family. And they get this book, and he's like, just get rid of the smartphones. You'll be fine. I don't know, Jonathan. So that was on my ones to avoid list. Now, don't avoid Jonathan Haidt. He's normally very good. This is one where he didn't do his homework. There's my list of 4 to grab and 1 to avoid from my listening of nonfiction audiobooks in 2024. On the other side, what was the biggest technology fail of 2024 as voted by the scientists at MIT? We'll talk about it right after this.
News Talk 610 AM, 102.1 FM, KVNU.
This is Kelly Snyder, a CAPSA board member. To the survivors listening today, you matter. This community cares about you, and CAPSA is here to help you find safety and support. To our donors and supporters, thank you. You matter to this work. Your donations make a safe place possible. And to those who know CAPSA and have considered donating, donate today and make a gift that truly matters. Learn more and give at CAPSA.org.
Intermountain Budge ENT Clinic has an experienced and caring team of physicians and staff to assist you with all of your ear, nose, and throat concerns, including head and neck surgery. Doctors Kaiser and Wilson and their staff at Intermountain Budge ENT Clinic will work together to provide excellent care and support throughout the entire surgery process, from your pre-op visit to your full recovery. And they accept all insurance. For more information about Doctors Kaiser or Wilson, search Budge Clinic ENT or call 435-716-1420. Local care with Intermountain expertise.
Wonder is timeless. Discovery is everlasting. And exploration is never-ending. At Loveland Living Planet Aquarium, we cherish the unforgettable memories you've shared with us for the past 25 years. Thank you for being a part of our story. Visit livingplanetaquarium.org to embark on a new adventure and continue our journey together.
Are you in need of excellent surgical care? Budge Clinic General Surgery offers the future of surgery with state-of-the-art robotic-assisted procedures. From cancer treatments to surgical needs, they've got you covered. Call Budge Clinic General Surgery today, 435-716-1950, to schedule a consultation and experience the best possible outcome. Trust Doctors Anderson, Marshall, McKenna, and Peterson, the experts at Budge Clinic General Surgery, helping people live the healthiest lives possible.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. For the People movie show with Andy Morgan tomorrow, wrapping up your week. We'll be talking best of 2024. We'll finish out our discussion that we started last week on Andy's ballot, which he submitted last Friday to the Utah Film Critics Association of his top 5. We'll have results on that coming up soon. And I wanted to wrap up with just one thing. MIT scientists got together and they voted on the biggest technology fails of 2024. And they came up with a tie, basically, between, well, quite a few stories that rotated around Boeing, the door flying off, the capsule that left some scientists stranded in space for an extra 6 months. They'll be there till March of 2025 because that Boeing capsule failed. So Boeing was up there, but eventually they decided on this one, the CrowdStrike breach. Millions of people were affected by this, shutting down Windows computers around the globe, and it was all done by a company who specializes in stopping this kind of thing from happening. That was the winner from MIT. Check it out.